I'm Kurt Clendenin, and we are here with Lorenzo Benitez and Zak Benedek. Is that how we pronounce your last name?
Benedek, yeah.
Benedek. And so here we are with the Kapow IFF 2021 Q&A here. These guys have made Remember the Lobster, which I just think is just a great film, and I think that you guys have a great rapport with each other. You can tell when an actor has a good rapport with, with the director because um, I've noticed that actors tend to feel free to improvise with what they're doing. If they trust the director and they feel that the director trusts them, then they feel some sort of leeway in improvising. And it looks like in Remember the Lobster there was it looked. I mean, unless all that stuff was written, but it looked like you were improvising some of that stuff, which looked like a lot of fun.
Yeah, I would say some of it was like there would be a point um we would be shooting a scene or we'd be doing something, and all of a sudden, just innocuously, I would do something like brush my chest with the brush, and Lorenzo would go, that's we're putting that in," and I did it just to make him laugh, just to be like, "Hey, check it out, I've got a lot of chest hair." But he was like, "No, no, no, stare at the mirror, do that. Let's put that in," because I think we tried making Frank kind of like almost a caricaturization of all of my little things that I do that can be like a little weird or awkward or anything like that. And we just wanted to take all of that to the nth degree to make him as ridiculous of a figure as possible.
Well, I thought it was shot really cool the way that you put it together because it's like a collage. It's like a collage. There's that phrase that says "showing without telling,"
Right.
and this movie is something where you're showing. It's showing. You're showing little tiny bits of things. You don't have to come right out and go, "Oh, this is what he does. Oh, this is what he does." Just the fact that you show like a little, 15-second shot of your character talking in front of a classroom. We don't have to show the whole classroom, but we get the idea. So showing it, and you're allowing the audience to fill in the blanks with their imagination, which is great because then it's a collaborative effort between the filmmaker and the audience. And what I thought was cool with the movie was that it was because I did look at the trailer for your other movie, Lorenzo, 6 Months to Salvation, and that thing looked awesome. That's a feature film, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. It's a
And
documentary.
so the fact that you put in all that work as a documentary filmmaker, it totally shines through in this movie because it's cool because like it's almost part documentary and part not documentary. Like it's cool because you have the idea that Zak's character is speaking to someone. He's telling someone his story, but it's not. But you never see who the cameraman is or anything like that. So it's cool. It's a very interesting way of telling a story. Did you already have it sort of set up in your brain that way, a certain
Yeah,
way that
yeah,
you're going to tell it?
yeah. That's a great question. Thanks. Actually, when I did start as early as the writing stage, I did picture the way that the film's like specific editing style would be already as early as that. I knew that it's like you kind of picked up on it in how it feels kind of like an extended montage, either for better or worse. And like there's a lot of inferences that the audiences has to make through things that are just excluded. And I think like what led that style was just yeah, like wanting to because there were a lot of like individual scenes and like location changes as part of the story. And part of me wanted to just tell a story as quickly and efficiently as possible. So like if he's in one scene and he needs to feel the audience needs to understand he's feeling this one emotion or going through this one plot point, like what's the quickest way in which to express that? And that was something that I think yeah, like was even though Zak like had a lot of room for improvisation and the script as it was by far from complete, and it was through the actual bringing it to life that it became the film. That was something I always kept in mind that like even though we have room to improvise Zak, like this shot needs to take place for like exactly 7 seconds or something like that.
Right, right.
And
So
I think it's because of that actually allowed for me to improvise certain things, because since it was very like stitched together, it didn't take that much to say add in a quick 2 second thing here or a 2 second thing there. Like I think I remember there's one shot that I remember specifically where Lorenzo was like, "Zak, we're just gonna need you to be like lonely in your bed," And I was like, wait a minute, have it be on the reflection of the window. You can see all of my friends, like, playing Frisbee or soccer outside, and just have it zoom out for that. Just an extra 2 seconds. And then I can close the window and you can see what I'm watching. And that allowed us, it's a lonely moment. What does that lonely moment look like? It's kind of left up to interpretation, as long as you can end up putting it within that small time frame. So that actually, I feel like that was like almost freeing, because I didn't think like, am I improvising too much? Is it too little? Because we already had the set parameters, and it was like, okay, I can only do this much.
Well, and it's fun too, especially if you know that you got little bite-sized pieces. It's not like you're having to run a marathon. And it's fun because if you know that you got like a 5-second piece in there, you can kind of you can sculpt those little seconds. You could be in that moment, It's a really genius way of doing it. I mean, it's so cool because the way that the movie was cutting around, and you were able to see like the different lighting effects that were going on. And it was cool because you don't treat the audience like they're idiots. You're not like spoon feeding them going, okay, this is the next day. Okay, this is a week after that. Oh, this is a flashback. You left that up to the audience to figure out. And it was cool because as I was watching it, I was sitting there thinking, okay, how would I shoot this? If I was to put myself in the brain of Lorenzo here, how would I be doing this? And I'm thinking, wow, that's cool, because you could shoot, whatever, 5 minutes or whatever of a shot, and you could just pepper that throughout the whole movie, So you can extend the life of that 5 minutes. It's not within that 5 minutes. It's 5 minutes throughout the whole movie. You're going, okay, boop, 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 boop. Let's just plug this in here, plug that in there.
Exactly.
And I'm sure you found a lot of really interesting synchronicities through that process too, by kind of throwing the pieces up in the air and seeing where they land, huh?
Right. To speak to the example you just referred to, for example, like there's a shot of Zak where he's just looking at the computer screen, right? And that specific shot, I remember we shot it in one day, and it's a 20-second take, right? But we ended up splicing that between the film in multiple different moments, because like it all depends in the context of where you insert a shot that changes its meaning entirely, right? So like there'd be one shot where his character's watching porn, then you cut back to his face, and that same shot suggests, oh, he must be watching porn right now. And then like another time he's on the computer, you can cut back to that exact same angle, and he's doing something completely different. So
yes,
like even though like I tried to leverage those things, maybe coming from a documentary background and knowing that like it's a little bit less strict in that aspect when you have to construct everything more so in the edit. And I do admit that like when like this all came together, like I knew that I wanted this to be a film where people know like the edit led the story primarily, like let's say more so than like the other aspects, like in coupled with the acting and all that too. So,
Yeah, for sure. I definitely think that the editing and the shot composition really made the film what it was. I mean, like, obviously he gave me a lot of freedom to act and improvise, and I helped with some of the dialogue, and that was so much fun to do. But I think I was even shocked when I saw some of the footage with the lighting, like you said, and the different ways that it was shot, because I'm not like a cinematographer. I don't know the first thing about even taking a good photo, much less a video. And so I would have how these scenes would look like in my head as I was acting them. And then when I saw how he would put everything in terms of lighting and how he would cut everything else, it was just like, it was mind blowing to me, because I saw these moments that were very real all of a sudden through a cinematic perspective. I mean, I think you really did a great job with it.
Well, yeah, and it's cool too how you keep metaphor. I think Jordan Peterson is phenomenal, and I think it's so cool that you were able to take put his wisdom into this movie to introduce a new group of people who probably are not familiar with him. And it's important to have that kind of wisdom that's out there as a primary source, I think, for people to be able to help raise their high vibrations, raise the consciousness, get them to be a little bit more mindful. And the fact that the lobster metaphor, it's just cool because you see this lobster with his claws. You get the shot of the lobster in his little aquarium with his claws shut, and he's inside the aquarium. If it's not bad enough that he's inside an aquarium, inside a cage, he's got his claws, and that metaphor shining through with your character, Zak, is the fact that it's like here he is majoring in communication, but has a hard time communicating his own life together. So it's interesting how you see these sort of dichotomies, these yin and yangs kind of flipping their way through there.
I also think it's interesting in the way that like I feel like, it was nice that we had someone like Jordan Peterson to use for this, but I also think at the same time, there's something that at least I saw when I first read the script, when I was thinking about this character. It doesn't necessarily have to be Jordan Peterson, right? And we see that at the end where he now has found a new person to kind of listen to. And the way that I saw one of the metaphors in this film was that, like, he's basically at rock bottom. And what do you do when you're at rock bottom? Do you try and find your way out, or do you sit there, and is there a way to even go deeper and even lower? And I think one of the issues was that Frank was not necessarily listening to Jordan Peterson in the way that he could improve his own life, but in the way that he was in such a rock bottom place and wasn't able to reckon with himself. He was using someone who could have some very valid points, like Peterson, and use it instead to justify the way that he views the world, and so that he doesn't necessarily have to improve upon himself. And I don't think that it's left up to interpretation. Does he end up changing by looking at this new person and throwing all the lobster stuff in the trash? Or has he simply, moved on to, the new boss is the same as the old boss? I think that's also something that's left up to interpretation, because we haven't, I think the point that this film, this wasn't focused on the climb out. This was just focused on what it's like when you're at an emotional, personal rock bottom. Because his career's fine. He's got a job, right, lined up after grad, but he's not necessarily following his passion. He doesn't have any sort of non-financial or career-based fulfillment. And so you have to ask yourself, is this something that he's going to use to pull himself out of it? Or is it something that is going to keep him where he is?
Mm-hmm.
Just to add really quickly on the inclusion of Peterson. Yeah, what Zak had said ultimately was true in that, like, I'd say that he was referenced insofar as a lot of people, the reason I wanted to tell this story particularly is that, like, a lot of people in my generation do know and read and like Jordan Peterson. He's one of the most famous, like, people, especially in the field of self-help, right? So I just thought, even to anybody who doesn't care that much about Jordan Peterson, if you're just gonna use like the token like psychologist who's giving you life advice, he's probably the guy. You know what I mean? At least on one hand, actually, I thought about this when I was coming up with the screenplay. Do I come up with a fictionalized, like a psychologist or something like that, or somebody actually recognizable? And going back to like what I was saying earlier about the point with this film was to just communicate, efficiently and clearly as possible communicate. Let's say instead of coming up with a different psychologist and having to layer this kind of like having to build up that character. Maybe as a documentarian, I just know like the real life props, let's say, or people that can be summoned as well and used to help tell a fictional world. So, yeah.
It was cool, and it just made me wonder, how long did it take for you guys to shoot that? Was that over a weekend, or was that over a month, or
It took a lot longer than
I think we started filming. I think Lorenzo came up to me with the script in hand in January of 2019. And then once we got the majority of the filming done before summer. So it was for like over the course of that semester, since we were still seniors in college.
But yeah, Kurt, the time between the first shot and the last shot when we wrapped could have been
August, right?
It was probably 6 months in all earnestness. We didn't intend for it to take that long. I was hoping it would take a matter of 4 weeks or something to that effect. But because we were student filmmakers and juggling our final semester of college at the same time.
And that's very, what's the word I want to say? It's like, I respect that behavior so much. The fact that even though you had this full load of college going on, you still used the resources that you had available to you. I think that's so kick-ass. You had a classroom there that you were able to use. You had the audition room. I'm sure that was another classroom somewhere at your college, right? And
yeah.
You had that audition room. So the fact that you had these resources, dude, that's what it's all about. It's doing the best you can with what you got. What resources do we got? What can we do with it? And the fact that you guys squeezed out as much nutrition out of that experience while you're going to school is just phenomenal. You guys hit the ground running with that. And, that's the thing. Every filmmaker wants to get their project shot as quickly as possible, edited as done, and done with. But as we know with some of these masterpieces, some of these things, sometimes it takes 4 or 5 years. Sometimes it takes, it could take 6 months. It could take, it takes however long it takes. It takes however long the inspiration keeps feeding itself to you. You can't just, if the inspiration is going, hey, here's some more ideas, and it's like, well, I already made, sorry, inspiration, no more. I already made a vow to myself that I would get this done within a few weeks. And it's like, but if you include me, you have no idea what could, come out of this. So, okay, I'll bring you in there. And then it extends it another 6 months. So, it's just clever the way that you guys did it. There's no, with something like this, you don't necessarily have to show like continuity in the sense that we hear about continuity. Does that make
Right.
sense? Like, you didn't have to like shoot the same shot from different angles and go through it, 20 minutes, okay, cool. Here's another shot, another 20 minutes of doing the same thing. And then you had to remember, oh, where did I pick up the coffee cup with my left hand or right hand, or did I take a big sip, or it's like,
Yeah. I mean, even when we were in New York too, we were lucky enough that we lived in New York, and so we were able to kind of, all of the New York footage was done at the same time. Every
brilliant.
single time where it was in the city was over the course of one weekend, like on the train, when I'm on the balcony, all of that stuff was while we were there. And there's also a bunch of unused footage. I'm pretty sure Lorenzo like fully charged his battery and just followed me around between the park and his apartment with the camera. And I was there was improvising, there was stuff that we might have used for B-roll here and there.
Yeah. On what you said, Kurt, about using resources, that's actually one of the most important purposes to even making this film in the first place. Because to be perfectly honest, I don't think I've ever told Zach this, but this film nearly it almost didn't get made, because I remember the day when I came up with the idea and almost thought maybe this is worth putting in a drawer because you're so busy with other things. But then I thought to myself, it's my final semester of college. There's a lot of great resources the school has offered, ranging from friends who don't have full-time jobs yet who can act, to classrooms and stuff like that I figured, it may be a little bit more stressful, but this is your window of opportunity, so use it, is what I thought. So that's why.
And that's-
Especially in terms of proximity, because we've been filming stuff, since graduation, and took a pause during the pandemic for a bit, but it's difficult when even if you're living just one borough across, it takes time to schedule and figure all that stuff out, as opposed to when you're in college, everybody kind of lives in the same neighborhood.
And
So
you got access to all these students. You got immediate access, right? Right there
Exactly.
next to you on the campus,
I was a 5-minute walk from Lorenzo's place our senior year, and so less than 5 minutes even. So he would just be like, "Hey, I need a shot here. Can you come over so we can
So
film this?"
cool.
And I could just walk over. So
Yeah.
that part was definitely a huge convenience that I think we might have taken for granted a little bit, and that we kind of realize now.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm glad that you took advantage of that. Lorenzo, the fact that you shot that whole feature film, 6 months to Salvation, the fact that you already had that as an example in your brain of doing this full feature-length film for, already having climbed a big mountain of something like that, I can imagine how having that driving you to make what you're making would be like, oh, come on, I did this feature film and documentary, of course I can shoot, I got these resources right here, I could shoot this stuff. So I can imagine that being like a really good positive reinforcement in driving your picture home.
Yeah, well, I do admit, as difficult as the semester was while I was making Remember the Lobster, you're right. I like to remind myself when it gets tough sometimes, you've already made a feature-length film before, this is relatively easy. But to that, I actually have to remark that if making that documentary, even though it was a feature, was difficult, and especially its editing process was very difficult, because you have to take all this raw footage as a documentary and construct the story. The shoot on Remember the Lobster was uniquely difficult, I'd say, because of how many location changes there were.
You guys did have a lot. I mean, it was
Yeah,
amazing. It was astonishing. You had a lot.
Yeah. Now that, to be perfectly honest, now that Zach and I are working now on short comedies again that are a lot more specific to one location and don't change nearly as much, it's so much more of a relief for shooting, because that was actually, now that I think about it, I'd probably reduce the number of locations in hindsight if I could, just for the expedience of it. But yeah, it was we did it anyway. I just know now that location scouting is a taller order than you think.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's such a relief to just be like, yeah, I'm taking an Uber over to your place. We're going to film it all here, and then that'll be that.
Well, I don't know if it's still like this or not, but at one of the Kapow, at one of the festivals, it was 2019. There's a guy who flew out. He worked with Troma. He made a Troma film, and he said that he shot it all over Yonkers. And he said if you pay for like just one permit, you can shoot wherever the heck you want all over that entire area. And when I heard that, I'm like, oh my God, that's like a kid in a candy store to be able to have an entire, to go, okay, here's your $200 permit, shoot whatever the heck you want within a week, within this, area, go, like I would think that would just be the coolest thing to be able to go, oh my gosh, like, you know, I have access to all these different areas. Have you guys, thought about utilizing some of those?
Well, as of the shorts that we're working on right now, because the character is like a lot of the characters is like social distancing and staying at home. Like we're not able as much to like make use of like New York City, 'cause the story doesn't require it nearly as much. But going on Remember the Lobster, when it came to using the locations, yeah, we like in a way no location was like was beyond consideration for us. Like so like some of the classrooms, we admit we just knew there was gonna be an empty classroom at that hour. We didn't even bother asking permission because who's there to ask permission for? It's an empty classroom.
Right, right.
So yeah, like that's kind of how a lot of those locations ended up just coming to be. So
Yeah, I think like a lot more of that stuff needs to be taught to the everyday filmmaker. A lot of times filmmakers think that they need, this multi-thousand-dollar camera to shoot something, or these crazy lenses, or it's like they're so focused on the technology and they're so focused on all this other technological stuff, but it's like it's almost like a hollow idea because there's no. I'll put it this way: what you guys are doing is where it's at. Doing what you can with what you got, and being able to trust your instincts, and going, okay, what locations can we get away with shooting at? What can we get away with shooting at without having to pay a permit? And if as someone comes up to us, we're like, oh, it's just a student film, or oh, I'm just a tourist. What do I know? And
Yeah.
it's like, it's just
When we
great.
did the one in the hallway with the drug test, that was at one point a semi-busy hallway. Like there were professors in those offices, and there were students walking by, if you remember. And I remember like we were filming it. We had no permits. We had no permission from anybody, and it was almost just like the polite college student mentality where it's like, oh, I don't want to step in the way or get in the way of this. I assume that they do have some sort of authority.
That's
And
right.
there'd be people being like, they'd walk around the corner, they'd see us filming, and then they'd go, oh shit, and then like turn around. So
Wow.
I think it's just one of those things where it's like, if you obviously don't do anything that could like hurt anybody or break anything if you can avoid it, and obviously stay within the confines of the law. But if you can, if you just act like you belong somewhere,
Yeah.
and you just act like you're supposed to be there with whatever confidence you can afford yourself, people are generally not going to pick a fight with you unless there's like directly something that they want.
Yeah, yeah. They're assuming that you guys have. Oh, I'm sure those guys have all the paperwork they need. I'm sure those guys were, like one of the jokes that my buddies and I would use whenever we liked doing a couple, some different pranks out there in the world and stuff. And so if anyone asked us, oh, what are you doing here? Do you have permission? We're like, oh, we're with the establishment. Don't worry, we're with the establishment. But it's like, who's the establishment? So you just throw around a big word, and it's like, oh, okay, they gave you your stamp of approval. Okay, I'll leave you guys alone. But yeah, that's funny when you just like own it. When you're just like, yep, this is what we're doing here, and people are like, whoa, oh my gosh, they're afraid of stepping in your shot.
Right.
Yeah, you could have someone come up to you with, I think there was actually someone who did come up to us with like the utmost confidence in that hallway and was just like, what are you guys doing? Like, what's going on here? It's like, oh, we're doing our scene for blah. We started through like some technical shit, and it was like,
Awesome.
We should only be about 5 more minutes, and they were like, okay. They didn't challenge us on it there, but we could tell like they left. So it was like we finished it in time. We were like, oh fuck, we better get out of here.
Dude, that's great. Oh, that is so cool. Well, you guys, I got to start getting prepared for my next interview. It was wonderful talking with you guys. Thank you so much for, expanding your wisdom and letting us know, what you're working on and so you guys were talking about new projects that are coming up. That would be something I'd like to end this interview on. What are these new projects, and when can we expect to see these?
Our next films we've got a slate of a handful of just short comedies again.
Yeah.
And they can be seen by the time that this Q&A would be broadcast at the festival. If they went on the website, benedek.tv.
Indeed. Yeah. It's they're kind of all working within the same theme of kind of like
Character in lockdown comic situation arises.
And then I think there's like a couple of, but it's basically just like poking at kind of how Remember the Lobster does, like these kind of established views of how things should be and how, you can kind of lose yourself in how things should be versus how you want to authentically live your life. And I think, the surrounding brand around that is kind of tongue in cheek like that. So benedek.tv. I think it's benedek.tv on Instagram too at that point.
So it's your last name, BENEDEK.com.
No, .tv.
Oh, .tv. BENEDEK.tv.
.tv. Yeah.
That's great. You guys, thank you so much. And those of you who are watching, check out Remember the Lobster here at Kapow IFF 2021. Thank you guys so much for doing this. This was really cool.
It's been a pleasure. Nice to meet you.
All right, guys. You take care.